Earlier this week, I had somebody ask me, should I express my support of Black Lives Matter on my social media or not? I took a poll, and nearly 60% of you said, yes, I should address the question. So let me be very clear that my mission has always been, we can change the world by the people working in shopping and retail. That is my true north. That has guided me for 26 years. That means I do not believe that we can just wing it and see things. I do believe that Black Lives Matter, that we have to work for a world to remove racial bias and end racism. And that shouldn't surprise you if you've been watching me for a long time. Doesn't matter. I am all about us making the world closer to Star Trek than anything else. And I wanted to share a disturbing memory I hadn't even thought about. But 10 years ago, I was at an event. I had done a keynote. A bunch of retailers, we must have had 30 of them, had invited me out to go to dinner with them at a fancy steakhouse. And we're there, and a handful of them keep using this code name. It's an area code, and I'm really struggling. I'm trying to figure it out. And then I realize, and I turned to somebody, I said, what are you talking about? And basically they had a code to be talking about Blacks and Hispanics and derogatory comments. And I was such a coward, I didn't say anything at that moment. And that stays with me to this very day. That would not happen today. I think when you see something or you hear something, you need to say something. And that could be as simple as, hey, that hurts, or, oh, yeah, I don't think that's it. But we have to find that voice in ourselves and give up fear. But I get it. We want this all to be easier. Nobody can watch the protests the last 13 days around the world and think that, I just wish it would kind of, settle down or something. We want it to be easier. We want somebody else to speak up. And those of you who know my story know about my dad, Garnet Phibbs. He passed away many years ago, and he was a minister. I know, what a surprise that I had a minister as dad. Actually, I come from a long line of ministers, both sides of my family. And he gained notoriety because U.S. Army had a training manual that said the Council of Churches was run by communists. My dad, being on the Council of Churches, took him to task and ultimately was on the front page of the Boston Globe one day, taking him to task for it, and actually changed the policy when other senators suddenly said, wow, what is that about? My dad marched with King, and his motto was to confront the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And, ultimately, the story he always liked to tell was that at dinner one time, this little 5-year-old, that's me, asked him a question, what's an N lover? You can't use that word in polite company right now. And he said, well, why do you ask me that? That's what I'm called at work. And I apparently said to him, because that's what they said before they beat me up. And my dad ended up taking an awful lot of actions, and ultimately civil rights became our better looking older son. And that's what my dad was consumed by. And we became lost islands to each other because of the conflict we lived through in the 60s. And any of you who lived through the 60s, it was a tumultuous time. And he lost his house, his marriage, his profession, his connection to his own family, and his connection to having a relationship with his sons over it. He took a stand and said, this is more important. In fact, the March on Washington happened, and he found out it was happening in, 63, 64, where the infamous Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speech would be given. And he got a life insurance policy. He packed his 3 sons into a car with my mom, drove us to my grandfather's house on my mom's side. And he had already heard from J. Edgar Hoover, some of you are going to die and not come back from this. And in spite of that, he took the action and said, I'm going to go do what's right. That's the guy I come from. That's the guy I wish I lived up to. And so one day I had asked him, and back in the late 90s, I think somebody had interviewed him. Actually, he lived in Charlotte for a long time, 3,000 miles from his family. Was it worth it, all that you went through? And he answered, no, that wasn't worth it because the cost was too great to my family. I made a choice they couldn't decide. And I was ultimately able to repatch up that life with him, and actually ended up with peace and ended up understanding what he was about and hopefully taking some of that on. And I was able to call him when Obama was elected, and I said, so still think it wasn't worth it? And he said, it was. That's what I want you to remember, is that all kinds of people, this is not about me, all kinds of people are working for a better day, a better world. That's what we have to remember. People support breast cancer, 9/11. We take all kinds of stands. especially on your business and personal. And why do we stop is fear. It's the same thing that kept me. Oh, I might get a client. I don't want to rock the boat. And there's many roads to equality, but I think taking action of something is it. And this is not a split decision. There are people talking around the world about this. And while a lot of people made jokes about Starbucks Race Together, they were on to something 5 years ago. And for me as a white man, it's my responsibility to tune in now and just listen, because life is too short not to care for everybody. Our customer experience director, Mary Grace, said it to me on Friday. After centuries of oppression, any small gesture might seem like too little, but it's never too late. And so my point here today is dialogue is the key. Progress is messy. It's uncomfortable. But when the good people go silent, nothing changes, and that hurts us all. And I do think that we can make the world a better place by the people working and living in shopping in retail.